Thank you very much. Today I work in the museum. Sorry, my English is quite bad, so I'm going to read my paper. Today I work in the museum located in Bordeaux, southwest of France. The Musée d'Aquitaine is today defined as a museum of history, conserving collections from all periods and all continents. Many years ago, we used to be also an ethnographical museum for this region of Aquitaine, and we still own a vast collection that is mainly representing traditional crafts and lifestyles in rural areas during the pre-industrial period. But I must say that these regional traditional collections are now relegated in our storerooms. And when I had to answer all these questions that Katia sent us, I was quite confused. How are ICH practitioners involved in my museum? How is ICH mentioned in our policy documents? The permanent exhibition is a chronological tour in the history of Bordeaux and the region Aquitaine, from the prehistorical times until today. It's 30 years old museography, and since 10 years we are renovating one section at a time. In 2014 we opened the 19th century section dedicated to the great transformations of a colonial port. ICH is, for example, represented by sailors' songs run in a loop on an area presenting cod fishing and transformation. Early next year, we will reopen a section devoted to the 20th and 21st centuries. Lots of videos, photographs, and interactive devices will show the great diversity of landscapes and lifestyles, with focuses on the barren forests of the Landes, the Aquitaine coastlines, the vineyards, of course. And the project leader, which is a curator from the museum, has conducted many meetings with a lot of people representing professional organizations, festival directors, teachers, training in the relevant regional languages, etc. She met scholars, she met researchers, she also collected objects, models, sounds, and videos that can reflect the major transformations of the city of Bordeaux and of the region during the last century. We don't call it ICH, but we in Bordeaux are perhaps like the Monsieur Jourdain of Molière, speaking in prose without knowing, working on ICH in each project dealing with the city's recent developments and the people living in the city. I'm not very sure that this very little project that I now will present is particularly relevant for our debates about ICH in urbanized societies. But for the Musée d'Aquitaine, this experience seems for me as a good example of how we should work with people on a project that is not a mediation project, I mean focusing on cultural democratization through workshops, for example, with professionals in the social field, but a real shared work of drafting and producing contents with inhabitants who are fully engaged in it. This project, this very little project, I repeat, was called Vous, voyez, can you see me? It was carried out in Saint-Michel, one of the most typical historical neighborhoods of Bordeaux. Just a 2-minute teaser in order to enter the subject.
Un jour, un mois décembre, Je suis devenu, pour mes proches, celui qui est parti. Et pour ceux qui m'ont accueilli, celui qui vient d'ailleurs.
Il reste encore quelque chose de ce vieux Saint-Michel qui disparaît jour après jour. Ici, on trouve par exemple beaucoup de glandeurs.
I personally borne witness to since the gentrification of Saint-Michel.
Ce qui est aujourd'hui cette population est le déracinement. C'est à cet endroit que je me suis fait une
So, the neighborhood Saint-Michel is located in the south of the old city of Bordeaux, near the river Garonne, and about 500 meters from the museum, which is the Bread Point. It used to be the major entering neighborhood for all immigrants trying to build a new life in the city. For example, people coming from Spain during the Retirada, after the conquest of Madrid by Franco. For example, also Portuguese fleeing the Salazar dictatorship, people from the former African colonies of France, and now today, people from Syria, Sub-Saharan Africa, Bulgaria, etc. But the city has changed a lot since 15 years. Bordeaux is now seen as a wonderful 18th century port that has been classified a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2007 after extensive renovation of its historical parts. The city was designated as Best City 2017 by Lonely Planet. It is now an international hub for tourists, a top Airbnb destination with all its negative consequences that are well known in Barcelona, Amsterdam or London. The high-speed line Paris-Bordeaux opened last year and boosted the housing market. Tensions are rising between locals and strangers. I mean, rich inhabitants arriving from Paris, and who can afford to buy buildings, houses, and modernize them. These are some examples of reactions to this gentrification process in Saint-Michel. Parisien rentre chez toi, Parisian go home. In 2015 and 16, the museum was asked to be part of a project to be held also in Paris and Marseille. No common rule or method, just the same aim, to work with people who had recently arrived in France on their perception of here, where they now live, versus there, where they come from. 3 different projects emerged, and we decided to call our project Vous, voyez, can you see me? Individuals coming from Spain, Syria, Italy, Mali, Algeria, or India were invited to present themselves and to share their impressions on this historical quarter where they live, Saint-Michel, or where they used to live when arriving in France. For more than a year, 10 persons met regularly with a pro-photographer, Christophe Boussard, and a writer, Christophe Dalich. Alone or all together, they strolled in the quarter, showing places and buildings that were or still are significant for them, drinking cafes or good wines on the Place Saint-Michel, enjoying a meal prepared by one or another. They were also asked to compare their actual life in Bordeaux with their former life in the city where they come from, how people acted with them in their first days in Bordeaux, how they learned a new language, new customs, new ways of sharing the city. And what does hospitality mean in their country of origin versus the way they would see hospitality in Bordeaux? We did not make a scientific selection. We did not decide that we had to have this or this community represented. It was not a project based on a sociological portrait of Saint-Michel. We just asked partners working in the social field. We asked friends and relatives. And the first group emerged with many people. During this year of meetings and talks and spending time together, some of them left the group and some others arrived. And finally, 10 people and 10 stories, 10 different looks on the same reality, living together, becoming part of what is still a popular neighborhood. It's important to say that these 10 people wouldn't perhaps not have met without this project. Chef Ali, on the left, coming from India and living for a great part of her time at home with husband and kids. Florence, on the right, coming from Ouagadougou, Burkina, cooking African dishes on the markets. But also David, coming from Brooklyn and producing documentary films. Amle, coming from Damascus, who aspires to become an actor again. Or Marcello, an Italian globetrotter, who finally decided to fix in Bordeaux with his little girl. The project deliverables also included film projections and a public debate about the gentrification of the quarter in the former market hall located in the center of Saint-Michel. And the publishing of the catalogue, of a little book intended to be the souvenir of the project, and that contains exhaustive versions of all the texts that were written, illustrated by portraits and drawings. Such a little project may open an important discussion for me about politics and censorships. In their text, some of the participants in the project criticized quite explicitly the municipal choices of urban renewal. And the public debate about gentrification was very vigorous, many historical inhabitants feeling abandoned and excluded. We invited a researcher who focused on a comparative perspective with Paris and with east of Paris. We invited also representatives of the Public Planning Authority, and 2 architects bravely faced dozens of angry people. We invited elected officials, but they did not come. What should be the good position for a museum belonging, funded by the city of Bordeaux, like the Musée d'Aquitaine? Here are some views of this little show at the museum. These are the photographs made by the participants. And I just want to end saying 2 things. Such a little project deals with inclusion in what's, this morning I heard about liquid city, and I like this formula. It offers the possibility to listen to other voices and other stories in our museums, even if these voices are critical. I don't know if it's ICH, but I know that it's political, and that talking about hospitality and social inclusion is urgent at the moment in France, and not only in France. Last word is for Maimouna, who came from Paris in 2003 and before from Mali. She also wanted to be part of this project, even if she was an old incomer, even if she had to leave Saint-Michel in 2015 because she couldn't be rehoused after the renovation of her building. She died a few days ago. It was a stupid accident, and since this weekend, everyone from this little group sends a lot of emails trying to organize an event in the museum. One of the souvenirs that come more frequently is the opening of the exhibition in the Musée d'Aquitaine. She came there with her husband and kids, and she was very proud. Thank you.